If AI is good enough and you're prepared to take the advice with insurance, but not from a lawyer, and there's an awful lot of areas where you can give legal advice without being regulated, the regulation now becomes a hurdle. Firms will have to throw away the regulation in order to compete. They have to get rid of all their juniors because they don't need them. And they won't need to have loads and loads of other senior attorneys working alongside them because they are being tapped for their knowledge, their ability to contact the client. It's not Harvey and Lagora who win because all they're doing is acting as a Trojan horse to expose the fact to the client that AI is good enough. And the lawyer is paying for this so that they can plan their own extinction.
Welcome to Legal Off The Leash, the podcast where we take the legal profession out of the box and into a happier, more fulfilling future.
We're your hosts, Scott Simmons and Elizabeth de Stadler. On today's episode, we're talking AI, Trojan horses, and the future of the legal profession with Quentin Solt. Quentin brings a rare combination of perspectives to this subject: 4 decades as a UK solicitor, experience as a corporate finance partner, founder of a pan-European tech investment fund, and an investor of AI since 2000. Quentin argues that AI is dismantling the legal profession, and he uses his experience to decode what this dismantling means for lawyers, their clients, and the global economy. Quentin writes and speaks about the next paradigm in the legal profession, examining how AI is shifting not just how lawyers work, but the fundamental structures of legal practice, governance, and economic models. He's currently writing a book with the working title AI, Abundance, and the Future of Work. Using Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory as a metaphor, he explores what happens when machines inherit the factory and what we owe to those left outside the gates. Quentin, welcome to Legal Off The Leash.
Thank you, Scott. That's amazing you could remember all of that.
No, he just... So
I wish.
the first time...
Let the cat out the bag.
Yes, she is.
Yeah, I am. But I find it remarkable as well. With the first time my kids listened to a recording of Scott and I, they said, he sounds so professional.
Yes.
I love that.
He does.
It was more about what her daughter was saying about Elizabeth than what it was saying about me. That's what really I enjoyed.
I'll give it to you. You are good at reading.
I'm good at reading.
I'm going to take the first question and I'm going to get one out of the way. So the first thing that I just want to say is that I read your article, What Lawyers Really Sell and Why AI Changes the Answer. I'm saying that because everybody else should read it, but also just so you know I read it, because I'm not asking this question for myself, but that is, what do you say when people say that AI will replace lawyers?
Yes, that's what I say. Yes. So there's a timescale involved here, and there are 2 paradigms we're going to go through. The first is as we automate the base legal process, and we're already seeing that. That's where we're seeing that the role of the junior lawyer will be replaced by the automatons. And increasingly, we're going to see AI provide the legal advice. And the first paradigm shift is going to be when we say, actually, the role of a really sophisticated senior lawyer is to give advice in a commercial context. And you hardly need any law to do that. You need some, because you need to know where you're coming from. Most of what you ask a lawyer when you say, well, what is it that you actually do, is they bring wisdom, they bring knowledge, they bring judgment, they bring experience, all of this stuff. None of that actually requires you ever to have studied law. And so that will be the first shift when we find that the law itself has been automated. And the next big shift after that is when we actually give clients what they want. But there's a long journey to get there. So the first thing I'd say is that the lawyer will become redundant when the client realizes that AI is good enough. Yeah. So at the moment, you go to, I'm going to swap this out as another analogy because it's easier for us lawyers to talk about other people. We live in this not us world, where we stick our head in the sand and say, it's not us, everybody else can be automated, but not us. We're too clever, we're too valuable.
We're special.
Yeah, we are special. Why, Elizabeth, do you go and talk to your doctor?
Because something's wrong.
Yeah. And Scott, have you ever been called up because the doctor says, you've got to that age where I need to come and give you a check over and just work out how you're doing?
I haven't reached that age quite yet. And
One
actually,
day
I'm not
you
100%
will.
sure whether they even do that. Whether they call you or whether you're just supposed to know
They're not going to
to
call
get in touch
you.
with them.
No. I was called in and told that, at my age, I really should start taking statins with all the other information they had about me because they wanted to keep me safe. And they said that'll make you healthier and safer than you would otherwise be. And when I was 40, I contracted gout and they put me onto this wonder drug, allopurinol. And it means I've just not suffered from it ever since. And the point is, I don't take medicine because I like the taste of the medicine. I don't go to the doctor because I like a good chat. I go because I want to remain healthy, get healthy, or reduce some illness I have. And that's why people go to lawyers as well. They don't go to a lawyer to talk unless they're really wealthy and need therapy, and they probably need more therapy after they've gone to talk to the lawyer. They don't get a contract because they love contracts. You and I are a bit weird. We enjoy reading contracts, but most people actually don't want a contract.
I like rewriting them in plain language.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it?
I do that for fun.
And people pay us to do it. Even better.
Yeah.
What does the businessman actually want? He wants a sustainable business relationship. And that is what the contract aspires to do. I could go and find a lawyer from 400 years ago and say, come and look at what I'm doing. And he'd look at it and say, wow, you're not using a quill, you're using a keyboard. And gosh, all that paper, it's all on a screen now. And the only thing which she'd really see as different is that we generate 4,000 or 5,000 times as much as he used to generate. And we probably charge 4,000 or 5,000 times as much as well. But basically, we're doing the same thing as we've always done. And we've created a static contract. We have said, here is a point of time where you and I are going to enter into a relationship. And it's going to be a business relationship. Now, I'm going to tell you what I want, and you're going to tell me what you want. And now let's send it to the lawyers, and they can identify all the things that could go wrong, and they'll try to pre-legislate for what will go wrong. Does that resonate? Is that what a contract does these days? And I should sort of caveat all this, that I'm talking in the context which I come from, which is corporate finance and commercial contracts. I happen to believe that much of what I say applies equally to other areas of the law, but I'm not a litigation expert. I'm not a family law expert. I'm not a crime expert. So it may well be that there are nuances and changes and things which are different there. But in the terms of a corporate commercial contract, my experience has been that we have spent years trying to identify problems which we are going to cater for in advance of them coming to roost.
And unsuccessfully, might I add.
Yes, but at great cost. But your unsuccessful is a really important point.
I used to be in litigation and then went into corporate law. I believe, because I've seen it, you can have the best contract, but a good lawyer will be able to find a way around it. So very often the contract is almost irrelevant in the litigation.
And that is so important because I always say, why do you go to the big law firm if you want to go to litigation? And the reason you go there is that when they're drafting the contract, you're relying on your guy being better than the other guy. And they're going to identify the pitfall and draft around it. And in fact, the fun in drafting contracts very often is spotting where other people have put tripwires in. And very occasionally, may I say it, putting your own little landmines into the drafting. And Scott, you're shaking your head. Is this not something you recognise?
No, he's always shaking his head.
Because I find that's the bit that I find really sad, is that that's what we do to each other, is that we're not in this to help two parties create a business relationship. Too many lawyers are in this to hide those little landmines in there. And I find that really, really sad because we keep talking about how we are client-centric and it's all about the client. If it was, we wouldn't do stuff like that. But that's a different point.
Actually, it's part of the same point because it's one of my mantras to clients is when I sign up a new client, there are a couple of things I say, and I'm very boring because I always say the same things. But one of them is, if it's too good to be true, it ain't true. Axiomatically, that's right. So you put something in there which is too good, sooner or later, it'll be a petard. It'll blow up in your face. It'll be a little landmine you're carrying around. It'll go boom. And it may not go boom. It may just be the other guy sees it and says, I can't trust you because I now see what you did to me. And all of this legal process revolves around trust. And the whole point of you're entering into a commercial relationship is because you want trust. And the lawyers, we have developed this incredible mechanism for so-called trust. But the trust is that we trust our client and our client trusts us to make sure that if something goes wrong, we're protected. The real irony here is that when someone goes wrong, nobody wins. So let's just run that through. You and I enter into a contract. I breach it. And I've got to go really quite a long way into breach before you actually do anything because it's so expensive. The contract is there to threaten it. But I know I can push those barriers to the point that you eventually say, okay, I've had enough, and you send me a letter before action. And now we get into litigation, and it could be a couple of years before we come to a conclusion. At that stage, one of us loses, and the other one doesn't win, because what's happened is we now go to a point where we get a judgment. We're just put back to where we would have been. Nobody wins in litigation, except perhaps lawyers who are working extremely hard, but they're just doing their job.
And you're
So-
down a relationship, right?
Right.
No more relationship.
Absolutely. Relationship with a client's a really odd thing. I used to lecture at Cranfield. This is going back 20 years. And it was at the time of Moonpig and Go Away, Hotel Chocolat. All those guys were in that cohort. And I'm not saying it's those guys specifically, but I would say to the group of people on the MBA course, how many of you have instructed lawyers? All the hands went up. And then I say, how many of you have been really frustrated by the process? And I say, how many of you found that your lawyers were no good? No hands went up. How many of you found that the other side's lawyers were really pants? Okay, I want to meet your lawyer. And of course, what we were discovering is that the lawyer is the filter. And when something goes wrong, they always blame the other side. And this is particularly true in conveyancing, where you see every time that, I'm sorry it was delayed, the other side didn't answer the question. And when you are actually allowed to get to the client on the other side and you say, why is it taking so long? They tell you, well, my lawyer says that you never asked the question. And I recently sold my house. I was horrified to discover that the lawyer representing me was, according to her, not allowed to copy me in on the correspondence she sent to the other side. So I would constantly ask, may I see what you've sent? May I see what's being sent? And I think once saw a copy of the correspondence which went to the other side.
The horror.
And I went and spoke with her and she sat me down and said, look, I'm not allowed to because of my regulatory requirements. I didn't bother spending the time going through it, but that must be happening day after day amongst client after client. And the opaqueness of the process was just horrible. So I say all power to conveyancing tool Keith. Yes.
Yes. But it will be interesting, won't it, to see just how they get on? Because at the time that we're recording this, they've just raised some finance, but they're still developing the product behind the idea. I've always thought conveyancing is ripe for AI. I started my career in conveyancing, and I have always thought it's incredibly process heavy, but the process is slow and it's bloated, and you've got too much of it's got to go to a million different places. Loads of institutions or people are involved in this, and it is slow and it's slow and it's slow. And on top of that, I always used to think if there was a client portal that handled all of this, because you still get conveyancers complaining that so much of their day is taken up with updates. And I always say, if there was a client portal that gave the update, you wouldn't need to give it. You need to give it because there is nothing currently being used or on the market. Because I've looked and I can't see anything that really handles that. But if there was, clients call because they've got nowhere else to go. And they've got nowhere else to find out what the update is. And then what they do get is, oh, it's not my fault, it's their fault. And it's not their fault, it's mine. And you just get this back and forth. A client portal would actually answer a lot of those things because you'd be able to see so much more. Genuinely, I love conveyancing. I think it has fallen into such a terrible place. And I don't believe that technology means all prices have to come down. I actually think in a lot of cases, technology is going to mean that you can get the outcome faster. And like everything else, where we want something faster and we get it faster, we pay for it to come to us faster. I've always taken the view that lawyers don't get paid enough. I think there are places, certainly, Quentin, where there is inefficiency that would bring prices down. But I don't believe that that's the starting point for everything, because I believe that lawyers don't get paid enough. The point being that we're in a place now where technology has the ability to really shine a light on where we are being really inefficient and where those workflows can improve. And it will then ask us, well, what are you going to do with all of this? If the process can be improved, what are you going to do with it? Are you just going to use it to bring prices down and increase volume? or are you going to use it to improve the client service and client experience?
Hold on. Scott's going to ask a question any moment now.
No.
The whole thing I've got to respond to. So let me just take you up on it. Scott, I almost see you becoming slightly embarrassed as Elizabeth.
Because the two of us know the question I'm going to ask you, and it's going to be about the billable hour. But
It is
I am
gonna be
going to
about the
leave
billable
it
hour.
as long as I possibly can, in the hope that I won't have to raise it
I'm
at
going to come
all.
on to the billable hour. Let me just answer a couple of things or respond in a couple of ways. I worked with a couple of entrepreneurs who were brilliant. They developed something called Your Keys, which was automating the conveyancing process. They came from a totally different background. One of them was a marketer and the other had been in the building industry.
Interesting.
Your Keys was designed to automate conveyancing, and this is going back probably 10 years now. And they took a very, very narrow market segment. It was brilliant. They went into new build and they did all the pre-investigation, which is presumably what takes the time in conveyancing, and put it all into the engine. And then they went to all the developers and said, look, you can run the process through us. We sold them to Zoopla, and for more money than could have been imagined when they set it up. And in that circumstance, where they weren't having to fight with somebody on the other side because they were the other side, there was only ever one forward piece in the chain, it worked, and it worked brilliantly. So we know it can be done. The Land Registry has come out saying that they will automate the conveyancing process by 2036.
10 years' time.
As far as I'm aware, they're not very good at meeting their deadlines, but they've gone out with the aspiration. So
yeah,
we can hope.
We're going to work backwards until 2036.
And then they will have automated the process if somebody hasn't done it for them beforehand, which is just possibly what Keith is going to do.
I don't know who chooses the names. Keith. Keith is strange.
You've got Harvey, you've got Garfield now as well.
Claude.
Yeah.
And there are good reasons for all of these. There's a scientist, I can't remember his name, who was Claude named after. You'll always find there's a backstory, and they're normally terribly clever.
There should be.
Yeah, and I don't understand them when they arrive. I
I'm
have a
gonna go
feeling
look.
Keith was pulled up because they liked the name. I'd rather hope that they'd gone through Abigail and Barbara and Charlie and Deborah first, but I mean,
Feels like it's almost like hurricanes, you know. It's almost like hurricanes. We're going to go through or cycle through all of the names and then get back to.
And do you remember when all the androids came out and they were Oreos and jelly beans and
yeah.
And Google didn't learn because we still got Nano Banana.
So on your LinkedIn profile, Quentin, you describe yourself as deliberately contrarian.
Do I? I didn't know that.
You do. And the funny thing is that you say that, but I think it's what I love most about your writing is that you're asking us to consider a more uncomfortable future for the legal profession, one that isn't just simply AI won't replace lawyers, it will replace lawyers who don't use AI. I think you're actually asking us to have a really good look inside of us all about what this future actually really could look like.
I hope so. I have been liberated and I now feel authorized because I don't need to sell anything to anybody. I can say what I think, and that's incredibly liberating. And I just say what I see. And this all started that I was at a men's breakfast group in my local church, and going back 2 years, and I said, of course, none of them, whoever they are, see what's coming toward us. And I realized that the men I was talking to all looked at me blankly and said, what is coming toward us? So I started to explain it. And I see a huge societal fracture coming as we rip out the heart of Middle England. And they simply didn't accept it, didn't recognize it. And I realized I'd gone a step too far. But what I also
What does
realized,
that mean, to rip out the heart of Middle England? Sorry, I'm outsider. What does that mean?
Great question. So what I'm looking at is Middle England describes the middle classes who keep society where it is. They're the guys who in their 30s, 40s, buy new cars, have a house with the mortgage. They possibly put their kids through private school. They go out to restaurants. They're the guys spending in society. They're the guys who sit on the parish council.
Okay.
They're the ones who run the local cricket club. They live in a way that coalesces society as we know it.
And we're ripping their heart out.
It all depends on them having a job, because the job is their sense of identity. The job is who they are and what they are, and it empowers them because the social contract is you work and you earn money and you pay taxes. And the taxes then go to fund the welfare and fund the services which we all enjoy. And it's a really simple balance. You've got on the one side those working, and on the other side those not working, and those who work pay towards those who don't work. And that's the social contract we've had for a long time. What's happening as AI comes in is that those working are going to leave this side of the balance, so it'll get lighter, but they're now going to not work, and they need to go onto this side, so they'll pull down the welfare. And the country goes bust very fast because we don't have enough resource to pay for everything that we expect to pay for. Am I making sense? So
Unfortunately,
why I see social unrest coming, because we've done it to the miners, and there was real social unrest, but Maggie and her crowd managed to keep that into a narrow vertical segment. This is going to hit us at all sorts of times in all sorts of places that we're not expecting, and it'll come slowly, but then it will tsunami-like hit us, and it'll hit us in waves, and between the waves everything goes quiet and we all start to settle down again, and then it'll come back. It'll be the next round of people being made redundant. I happen to believe that lawyers are probably in the first run of those, and so that's where I'm going to take exception with you. You say lawyers aren't paid enough. I'm not going to argue that historically we've not been paid enough. No, we've had to scrimp and save all the time because our poor clients never paid a penny. But what have they been buying from us? What is it that we've been selling them?
My view has always been outcomes, service levels, experience, peace of mind, risk mitigation. That's always been that's how I describe it. But most lawyers will tell you that people are buying contracts, they're buying knowledge, they're buying time. And that's the thing that I rail against, is that, clients aren't buying time. We're selling time still, but they're not buying it. But that's always been my view. Lots of people describe it very differently as to what clients are buying.
And I'm going to entirely endorse what you say about buying outcomes. The clients may not actually be buying outcomes or thinking that they're paying for outcomes, but that's what they want.
Yes.
They want the outcome, which I've already discussed is, in my environment, a sustainable business relationship. That's my guess. But what most lawyers actually sell is their knowledge. That's what you're selling. And that has been scarce, which is why it's been able to command a premium. Knowledge is no longer scarce. Knowledge is being democratized. Knowledge is becoming abundant. And when something is freely available, the clue is in the word. Freely available. You don't need to pay somebody to tell you. And I'm going to look back. I said earlier that the start of the downfall of the lawyer will be when the client discovers AI is good enough.
That's what I was going to say to you, is that it's about good enough, because the risk with all of this is that you can download a document from ChatGPT or Claude, and it can look very good. And it can look like it has all of the right answers.
it sounds like it as well.
And it sounds really, really confident. And for the most part, that document that it creates probably is good enough until something goes wrong that it couldn't answer because it didn't know the circumstances and you didn't know how to ask the right questions. For me, that's always the place where lawyers sit, or will sit for at least some time. Do you see that, or do you see it right now but not down the line?
Certainly don't see it down the line, but for right now, you're right. And if you look on LinkedIn and the other fora, and you hear all the lawyers with their heads in the sand saying, look, we've never had it so good. We're making more money than we've ever made before. And, oh, you wouldn't believe how much time I spend sorting out the crap that the people have coming from AI. And you say, yeah, but this is a transitory problem. This is not going to last. Today's hallucination is tomorrow's joke.
Yeah.
What we are seeing is it's not good enough yet, but it will get good enough. I now routinely send my clients to Garfield if they have a small claim. In fact, I had the other day, I had a claim of £30,000, and we did the assessment, said it's rock solid, go to Garfield and claim 10 grand, because that's all they'll do in small claims court, because you will win it and will be there. Now, if you're in a business and you get a contract in, at the moment, you have a binary choice. Do I read it and take a punt, saying, no, I've done so many of these, I know what it says, I'll sign this and send it back? Or do you pass it to your legal team or to your lawyer? Let's assume you don't have a legal team. You send it out to your lawyer. The first thing that happens is nothing, because you've got to reach the lawyer. And that probably takes 3 days. Now, Scott, I get on to you to stop. I've got this new contract. I'd really like you to review it. Can you do that? Oh, absolutely. Tell me what it's about. If I'm really lucky, you'll ask what it's about. Otherwise, you'll just say send it across and I'll assume I know. So I'll tell you what I think I know about it. And that gets to my understanding of what I want to achieve. It arrives with you and it's your understanding of what you think it should achieve. So we're already in that fuzzy area where that's where you add your value because you know about this better than I do. Perhaps 3 or 4 days after that, you come back with some observations and comments and I instruct you and everything's happy. I now don't know whether it's 3 days, 3 weeks or 3 months before I'm going to get a contract. I don't know whether it's £300, 3,000 or 30,000. I don't know when you send me that contract back, whether you're going to send me a red line and say, here, send it to the other side. But you're not going to send me a red line. You're just going to send me an updated version saying, you can sign this. I don't know whether you're going to explain to me why you've made the changes or you just make them and I trust you. All of that. And you know what? It's the pain and the cost. I've gone through 3 days, 6 days, 3 months of delay in order to get to a contract, which I now present to the other side. This is not building a sustainable business relationship. And that then leads me to say, so if the client could put that same contract into AI and get a response straight away, it's a value proposition. It's not just that it cost me less, it cost me less time, less hassle, and it will likely allow me to interact with my counterparty faster.
Yeah.
Here's the kicker in this. Why do I not do that now? Well, if I am doing a small contract, you're already telling me lots of people are doing this because we're seeing the lawyers picking up some of the detritus when the AI got it wrong. But believe you me, that's the tip of the iceberg. There are a whole load of contracts out there which are working just fine or nobody's actually spotting don't work, which is another key piece of this.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
And yes, it doesn't matter. We've got an agreement and actually we're doing exactly what we should do, which is have a sustainable business relationship. And the contract is put in the top drawer and never looked at again. It doesn't matter. So yes, we've got some people who do find that there's been work generated by this, but why don't I go to AI straight away? I just sold a business, one of the AI businesses I invested in, Scott. I sold that in January. And we went to a city firm to advise us. It was a lot of money we were selling it for. Why did I go to a city firm? Why did I use a lawyer to do my conveyancing? Because these were the biggest transactions I was ever going to do. And to me, it really mattered. And the inertia said to me, Quentin, you go off and use a lawyer. It's the right thing to do. Now, I'm the guy who's saying, no, AI will do it all, but not yet. So I was ready for that. And I paid a huge premium, got really frustrated, wrote 15 blogs, which I didn't post because they were so upset and outraged at the legal process, and decided that it was cathartic to write them down and journal and then let that go. But that process, I went there because I needed to have the inertia of the comfort. And what was the comfort? It was that I had an insurance policy at the back end of this.
Yeah.
And the insurers will control all of this because we've already seen 11 labs putting out insurance for AI bots. We're already seeing Munich Re offer AI insurance. Last year, my professional indemnity insurer would not insure anything which was done by AI. And they were requiring us to not have AI. This year, if you've got Harvey and Lagora, can you get insurance? I think so. Clio, Council. Next year, they'll start to say, okay, let's look at the math. Let's do the sums. Elon Musk and his Tesla cars are now 8 times less likely to have a road traffic accident than a human driver. Of course, when they do have an accident, it'll be all over the news and the media because it's big news. But the reality is they are 8 times safer. Do I believe this? An AI is going to be 8 times safer than a human? Yeah. Frankly, I do. They don't get out of bed the wrong side. They don't have their pre-bias. They don't forget things. And once it's made the mistake, you correct it. It doesn't make it again. So how many times have you worked with a trainee or a younger solicitor or even experienced it yourself and you've been told, and I made that mistake again? So the AI will get safer and better and the insurance will start to filter through. We're already seeing with Garfield, with Law Fairy. There are a whole load of these early stage businesses coming through with insurance. And that's going to change the whole ballpark because now I can afford to take the risk and the knowledge is ubiquitous. No, I don't believe it'll become more expensive. In fact, I think it'll get cheaper. And one of the arguments which has been thrown at me is, but there's so many unlawyered people who are doing things which should have lawyers, but they can't afford them. And I say, yeah, and they'll get lawyered, but they won't pay for them. You pay $20 a month. We know it's hugely subsidized for your AI model, and we know it's not specific AI model, but you'll be able to pay $20 a month for a very narrow legal model, which actually does what you want. And if you're a big corporation, you don't mind paying $2,000, $30,000 a month if it does what you want it to do and it creates the ability to enter into those business relationships really fast.
For me, I think one of the big points that you made there was you went through a process, a kind of hypothetical process where you said, got to get the terms of engagement out, then got to read through everything, then got to come back and I don't know how long this is going to take and this is going to take and this is going to take. And at the end of it, I don't know whether there's going to be more questions. I think part of what is going on now is that AI is exposing just how inefficient legal services are provided. And the ability to reduce that inefficiency has been there for 2 decades or more with technology that we have opted not to use. I always think, if law firms use document automation better, the jump from where they are to where AI gets them would be much smaller. There would still be an improvement, but we use document automation so poorly that now it just looks like it is revolutionary, like just the huge jump in what is possible. And there was always going to be a jump. There was always going to be huge improvement. But just the amount of that improvement is vast because we have sat on inefficiency and poor workflows and not listening to clients for so long. That's where I think we've actually done the most damage to the profession. We've almost given ourselves no options because we sat on it for so long.
You are absolutely on the money. You are right. So much of what we do is commoditizable. And the really sad thing is I went around the firm and I found every team and I said, we can commoditize you. And they said, no, not sure. And I said, tell me, we'll choose a process and we'll do it. And they, well, we can't be. One of my first questions is, are you logical? Oh, yes, you're entirely logical. I said, correct. If you're logical, then we can follow the rules. Oh, yes, but. And everybody was, yeah, we can see how you can do that, but not us, not me. So we're back in that not me world. Ended up, the poor employment team were told that they were the ones who'd be automated. So I went in with our head of IT, Janet Dave, wonderful lady, and we did this analysis of how long it would take to create an employment agreement. Short story is that they totally underestimated how much and how long it took to create an employment agreement by a factor of 3, both time and cost.
Wow.
And we actually generated what was then a rules-based system on an ASP, application service provider, the precursor to SaaS, to automate the contract. Late Neil Sinclair, brilliant man who knew how to draft stuff very, very succinctly in all the style guidelines, and we developed this. First thing is the lawyers refused to use it. They didn't want to ask questions and answers. They liked to sit down and interview the client and get from the client what the client wanted. So we then had a trainee sit in, ticking boxes as they went through, and then saying, there are these questions you haven't asked. The lawyers still hated it, but we then generated the contract. And here's the kicker. They said, in all conscience, we can't sell this. I said, why not? Because we can't charge our time when we can generate a contract. Yeah. We ended up facing it outward to sell to Joe Public. But of course, as a medium-sized city law firm, we had no market penetration. We had absolutely no ability to sell. And in the end, Deloitte came along and they invested alongside us and they wanted to make this available. And we sold it into PC World, who ridiculously said we had to take it off the CD, off the server and put it onto a CD because people's internet broadband wasn't fast enough.
Wow. We're going to have to explain to the younger viewers.
We then had to, we sold it to a couple of banks who were audit clients of Deloitte. And this thing was getting some traction when Sarbanes-Oxley kicked off. And it was after Enron, and the rules came in saying that the accountants weren't allowed to give consultancy advice to their audit clients. There was some question whether or not we were giving consultancy advice or what we were doing, and the whole thing was just closed down because the risk was too great that it would eat their audit client base. The point, however, Scott, is that 25 years ago, 30 years ago, we identified exactly what you're saying. And over those last 3 decades, what happened? We buried it. Just in the same way that Sage, the accounting software, for years buried any active service provider or SaaS competitor to their CD-ROMs because they knew they had distribution. They knew that they could keep their clients. It was only when Xero really broke it that we lost the value in Sage. And we saw the same with Kodak. Kodak invented the digital camera and they squandered. And they said that they develop internally and they develop it themselves whilst trying to stick to the old model. And that's what we're doing. We're seeing loads of law firms developing their own AI, and they're all going to fail.
Why are they all going to fail?
Because the structure of the law firm is not suitable for the new business model. So the new business model, as Scott has already identified, will be giving consultancy advice, high value consultancy advice on top of the legal process. You don't need the pyramid structure for that. You don't need lots and lots of juniors. You don't need to have a large equity spread because you're doing the work. Why are you going to share that with somebody else? It's your knowledge, your database.
Yeah.
It's EQ rather than IQ, which is going to win this one. And it's, as I said right at the front, it's not legal knowledge which will differentiate you. It's your ability to communicate with your client. It's your emotional quotient, not your IQ, which will be the big distinguisher. And by the way, the law firms have huge legacy cost, not only in the premises they occupy and the systems they have, but they have 2 other really real anchors on them. One is their brands. They are Stella Artois. They're reassuringly expensive, but people don't want reassuringly expensive. They want reassuring. Yeah.
Also very high in alcohol.
Nice one. The other problem they have is the moat, which has always protected them, will become a barrier for them. Scott touched on this. He said, you go to the lawyer and they put in place the engagement letter. They do their KYC. They do their MLR. They go through all the compliance process. And until now, you needed to go through all that in order to onboard the client. And that was part of the regulatory protectionism. Now, if AI is good enough and you're prepared to take the advice with insurance, but not from a lawyer, and there's an awful lot of areas where you can give legal advice without being regulated, the regulation now becomes a hurdle. Firms will have to throw away the regulation in order to compete. Excuse me, why are they still a law firm? They have to get rid of all their juniors because they don't need them. Excuse me, what's the pyramid structure doing? And they won't need to have loads and loads of other senior attorneys working alongside them because they are being tapped for their knowledge, their ability to contact the client. And you know what? It's not Harvey and Lagora who win, because all they're doing is acting as a Trojan horse to expose the fact to the client that AI is good enough. And the lawyer is paying for this so that they can plan their own extinction. It is the most extraordinary thing. Then Harvey and Lagora are rappers. Yes, they're very, very sophisticated. I don't want to demean them, but they are systems which sit on top of large language models. And large language models are doing the hard work. But even the large language model isn't going to make the money because we've got so many open source large language models. The information has been democratized. The only people who really win out of this at the end are the infrastructure providers and the individuals who remain giving advice to the client. And that isn't legal advice anymore.
I have a question. So we keep saying, we're not going to need the junior lawyers, but where do the senior lawyers come from then?
That was my question.
Wonderful question. Tell me, Elizabeth, why do you need a senior lawyer when all the legal advice is being given by AI?
I think this is a trick question and I'm going to abstain from it. Why do you need a senior lawyer if... Well, it's strategic, right?
Strategic.
Strategic work is what everybody says.
Okay, and can you remember when you were a trainee doing a lot of strategic work?
No, none whatsoever.
In fact, I remember the first quasi-strategic work I did was after I'd been a partner for 6 months, and I threw off the shackles and said, blow this. I'm actually going to tell you what I think rather than what I am allowed within the strict boundaries of the tolerance of the law firm. So
I had to leave the law firm to become strategic.
Isn't that your key? that it's not the law. Yes, they're absolutely right. But here's my argument against that, or here's my response to that, because it's one I'm constantly getting is, but no one's training the next generation. Y2K came, and you remember all the computers which failed, all the risk that we had, and there was nobody who could still code in Fortran and COBOL and those languages, which you'll have to explain to the younger viewers.
Again.
But those programmers were still out there. They normally now had long beards and turned a bit hippie, or were always a bit hippie, but they were there and they were willing to work. We're going to have exactly the same here. We're going to find that the AI law firms will get so far and there will be stuff they can't do. And they'll go back to guys like you and me who will have been long retired and say, we need your help. And we'll say, give us some fun. Do you remember how much fun we had drafting contracts? We're going to apply that again. And we'll fill in the holes that the AI hasn't got. So we don't need to train the next generation because there ain't no next generation in my paradigm. No, I am being flippant. This will take longer than one generation, but it is not going to take very long. And if you listen to the leaders of the foundation models, it'll be next year. If you listen to Geoffrey Hinton, it's going to be a bit longer than that. But I see what he sees. We are running in parallel tracks. And only after had I landed on where I'm going with this argument, did I see what he's writing. And I realized that guy's on the money.
What are the timelines that we're looking at? She asks as if this is an actual natural disaster that is coming. But like, what are, because I think people are lulling themselves into a false sense of security, right? I mean,
I'd love to say it's 17 months, 3 days and 5 hours. You don't expect that level of precision.
You can deal in decades.
I could deal in decades. Okay, so in 2 decades' time, we will have had a total paradigm, and the way that the law is practiced will be totally different from the way it is today. We'll have living contracts, and I can go on to explain that. But within the next decade, we will see the legal profession as we see it being eviscerated. It was Thomas Edison who, when he introduced the light bulb, people said, this is great, but no one will be able to use it because we don't have electricity. And he said, I am going to make it so that only the really wealthy can afford the luxury of eating by candlelight. If we let that one sink in, we are going to get to the point where only the really wealthy can afford the luxury of have a lawyer tell them what the AI said.
Okay.
And that's going to be within the next decade. Because, well, I can't say because, but my reasoning is that electricity is now ubiquitous, but it took 100 years to get here. We are moving at more than 10 times the speed we were moving at 100 years ago, significantly more. There are lots of other barriers, and there are lots of reasons why these things don't happen. You know, I thought autonomous cars would be much faster than they are. And one of the big problems to electric cars is getting planning to allow you to plug them in and recharge them in the street.
Yeah.
I never foresaw that. I'm the idiot who said when text messages was 4p, SMSs were 4p each, and BlackBerry came out, I said, nobody's going to use SMS. I never thought about the mum at the school gate who wanted to text saying, yeah, I'm here too. So there are all sorts of reasons why it won't happen, but it will happen within the next 10 years for the lion's share. So
Okay.
no guaranteed timescale, but that gives you a sort of a feel.
That's fine. I'm already not a lawyer.
I was going to say, the look on Elizabeth's face as you've been describing all of this, I wish I could bottle that up and send that to her. I've never seen
You could
her face
probably.
look like that. I mean, it's sort of like beyond almost contemplative. It's almost resignation. She's never had a conversation like this before, Quentin. I think we have all. I think that just the fascinating thing about all of this is that none of us know where this is going. For all we know, you could
There's
be
such an amount of bullshit on LinkedIn.
Maybe that's
but this is it, isn't it?
Bullshit.
None of us know. But what I love about what you are doing is you are demanding that we actually think this through beyond the AI is going to replace lawyers who don't use, that we actually have to think about these things as if they are a real possibility of how this is going to go. Because right now I have all these conversations, and if you mention anything like this, people laugh it off as if it's utterly ridiculous. And it's not. There's so much, not just scientific, but foundational basis to what you are saying. And there's it's not just, it's common sense. Over the last 4 years, 3.5, whatever it is, years since ChatGPT came on, the progress that has been made and the way in which the vast majority of us didn't keep up with it from the beginning and aren't now keeping up with it. I think when you look at things like Keith and Garfield, they are, for me, they're transformative because you've opened up the market. One of the brilliant things you just said was, we had a client, had a claim for 30,000. It was a definite, sure thing. Go for 10 because you can do it all through Garfield for £150 all in, or you can go for 30 and it will cost you 30 or more to go through that process. Right now, we can't even contemplate where we might be in 10 years, but we have to open ourselves up to the possibility that all of these things could very well happen. And right now, law schools and law firms are training trainees and young lawyers and law students to get really good at AI. And
Really?
I keep saying much like I think what you're saying, Quentin, is really and truly what you're doing is training them out of a job. You're not training them on the things that really will matter once AI is doing this. And I think that is brilliant about what you write, is that because you talk about the Trojan horse and you talk about it in the context of Harvey Lagora, but you also talk about it in that kind of way that we're letting these things in to destroy us. And that, I think, is so fascinating.
That's really kind of you, Scott. You're flattering me. You're blowing the smoke, and I'm loving it. The danger of this is you get into an echo chamber of approval. And I'm going to call out Lev Lukton, who really excoriated me. And I wrote to him privately saying, look, rather than have a gladiatorial debate, let's actually talk to one another. Do you know what? We got on so well. And Lev and I, we're now debating this stuff. We don't agree, but it's fabulous having this. And we've started this thing on LinkedIn, the Trojan horse debate, hashtag Trojan horse debate. And he lobbed something in, I lobbed something in, and it really allows that open debate. He is also an ex-partner or partner from a very large law firm in the States. He's also an investor in technology. So we've got so much in common, and we diverge slightly, but discover that we then come together again. And I'm loving that. And I haven't even told you about the final paradigm of law, which is totally different again. Living contracts are what are coming. What that means is that rather than the static contract, which we are all familiar with, we have a relationship where we have intelligent agents negotiating on our behalf. And rather than breach the contract, we inform that we're not going to be able to do something which we agreed to, which we would do. And the agents themselves sort out what the optimum resolution is. Because at the moment, we are adversarial in our contracting style. And if you think back to what we actually want, we want a sustainable business relationship. Nowhere near that. And the contracts actually force us apart from that. And by the time you've got the Internet of Things and you've got blockchain, you can go in and allow your intelligent agent to go all across your industry, know everything that's going on in your business. And you know what? The other guy's got just as an intelligent agent on the other side. So there's no point in hiring a clever lawyer because you've both got the best possible advice you can get. When something starts to go wrong, you negotiate to find the best outcome. And that's where the law will end up. I learned this from my mediation training when they taught us about the BATNA, the best alternative to negotiated agreement. And that's, you want to know what your BATNAs are, and then you agree what you're actually going to do. And if you monitor it on a day-by-day basis, an hour-by-hour basis, however, whatever the right increment is, absent fraud, you have a sustainable business relationship. And because you get the visibility, you trust one another. And that's what you want.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
sounds utopian.
That's scary.
That it sounds utopian.
That's got to be better to what the current situation is, which is as soon as there is a breach of any kind, people go straight to their lawyers, and too often the lawyers want to go straight into the litigation. Yeah. And that's when, as Elizabeth has said here and on other occasions, once you start down litigation, the relationship's over. You're not recovering that relationship. So you're not back to where you were, because as soon as both parties can get out of that relationship, they're gone. This is, for me, part of the problem with litigation. That living contract should have been the way that it was previously. Yeah. We know that there's a breach. Let's try and sort this with the best possible way forward. And I know that, we've got ADR as the alternative, but it's not
Same, but
effective.
different.
Exactly.
It could never have been before. And the reason it could never have been was you couldn't trust the other party. The trust comes from the absolute certainty of knowledge that my agent is on my team,
Yes.
knows everything. I'm not hiding anything from you. You don't hide anything from me. It's so counterintuitive, but it actually makes for sustainable.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're right. It should have been, but it could not have been. Now it can, and it will.
Right. 4 questions. Let's go. Quick fire.
So at the end of each show, we ask guests 4 questions designed to get your thoughts on the legal profession as it is and how it could be, to give our listeners some ideas of how they could possibly design their legal careers, no matter where they are right now. So, Quentin, question 1. What advice would you give a lawyer just starting out in the profession?
Unless you're really, really loving what you're doing, explore whether or not you want to have another job.
Get out.
That's a first.
That is the answer. Run.
I'm not going to
Run
lie.
for your lives.
I'll tell you what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't advise them to learn how to use AI. Let me unpack that. My great-great-grandfather had a car. He was one of the first to have a car. And there was a man who was called the chauffeur. And the chauffeur knew how to change the spark plugs and would crank it every morning, whether my great-great-grandfather wanted to go out or not. The car was run. And this man was a mechanic. He was called a chauffeur because he could drive. Today, I jump in the car. I don't even know how to open the bonnet, let alone change the spark plug. Learning how to code AI will be as irrelevant in 3 years' time for the vast majority of us. We will get in and we will use the car. We learn how to drive. We learn how to do what we need to do. We don't need to know how it works.
I'm relieved. I didn't want to reskill.
But if you look at it, there's another whole piece in this, and that is that if you go into a law firm at the moment, do you remember 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we were looking for lawyers, we were recruiting for personal assistants who had word skills, who could use Excel, who could work in PowerPoint. This is all on the basis that we have software in the industry, which is different and you have to have a skill to use. Increasingly, Apple has merged the distinction between consumer and work, and it's all in the interface. And if the interface is intuitive, and Apple is not intuitive, it's just if you know it once, you know it for everywhere in their system. Once you have an interface which we can all use, you take away the need for a skill to know how to use a specific software. So we are going to find that law is presented in a consumer interface.
What's the one thing about the legal profession you wish would change, and how do you think that change could happen?
The one thing I wish could change is that we could put AI back in the bottle. Take the genie,
Really?
put it back in. Oh, I'd love it. Yeah. I had such fun being a lawyer. I loved
Me too.
it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
It was the mental exercise, the meeting with other people. It was combining IQ and EQ and just being. And I got paid for talking. How marvelous is that?
I love the analogous thinking. I like, making those connections, especially if you've got a problem that doesn't fit sort of snugly in any area of law. That was my favorite. So you can make stuff up.
Yeah, I often used to say to my clients, meat was around for many, many years, millennia even. Bread, everybody had it. It wasn't until the Lord put them all together and called it a sandwich that we created a meal we could carry with us. And as a lawyer, that's what I felt I was doing the whole time, taking this from over here and this from over here, putting them together and saying, look, obvious. And it was so obvious once it was done.
Yes. Okay, now you're making me sad. You've made me nauseous. Now you're making me sad.
So, Quentin, what's a common myth about success in the legal profession that you feel needs to be debunked?
The success is measured by money. So when I left the law firm, large measure it was because I was told that the target was profit per equity partner of £1 million. And I said, I'm not prepared to do that. And the reason I wasn't prepared to do it was that I knew it would destroy relationships. And I have to say I have observed far too many lawyers flourishing in the legal profession and having an abysmal time in their personal lives. And I would really say measure success in the round. Look and see what you as a person achieve, not you as a lawyer do.
What would it look like if you could design the ideal legal career path? We know it's not AI skills or learning how to code AI.
It depends on the timescale. In in the short term, the perfect legal career path is to do exactly what they are currently doing and doing it as well as you can and giving it your all and enjoying it as well as suffering through it. You get out what you put in is my great belief. In the longer term, as you will have heard me, the legal career path actually becomes being a strategic advisor to commercial. And that's why I think that the consultancies who had the foresight to lock their specialist knowledge away in their own AI models, which if you read the Valuations on Sand and Trojan Horse articles, I conclude it's actually the consultants who win. So if you wanted to be successful as a lawyer now, I would say start becoming a consultant in one of those consultancy firms.
Well, Quentin, tell people how they can find you if they want to reach you for more information.
They don't need any more information. If they want to find me, I'm on LinkedIn, constantly stirring pots and giving my thoughts. And I have a lovely lady, Fiona, who saw what I was doing on LinkedIn and said, can I put this onto Instagram? And she's persuaded me to do some walk and talk videos. So I'm now on Insta as well, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and your Substack. That's where
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm sorry. For those who are actually interested in more than sound bites, Substack is where I put my thoughts out. And I have been incredibly flattered at the following I'm getting there. It is quite extraordinary how many people there are who seem to be happy to read an awful lot, because I do write at length, because you can see the speed at which my brain runs. And I talk to my machine. So it literally transcribes as I run. And then I will be honest, I put into Claude and I say, can you just spell check this? And can you fact check it? So if I get, my tagline is facts are friends. And I say that because it's only when you know the facts that you can start to address them.
Mm-hmm.
And if I get a fact wrong, please kindly tell me, because then it will change my thinking. We do far too much from gut. We do far too much from predication. We do far too much from raw emotion. And I'm filled with that. So I have to stand back and say, what are the facts? How's that going to inform me? And of course, I know I've got my internal bias, so I'm looking for facts that support me. But actually, there are facts out there which don't. And this is one of the great things of working with Lev. He'll pull me up and say, is that right? And sometimes I'll say, yes, it is. And sometimes I say, fair cop. I've allowed myself to be skew on that one because it's what I wanted to hear.
I will say this, in a world where we're almost training ourselves to only have our concentration for about 45, 48 seconds, Quentin writes in real detail. And yet I've never found myself wanting to leave those articles until I've read the whole thing. They're written really well. They go into a great amount of detail. They cover off lots of different things in each article. But in this world that wants everything done in such short amounts of time, you've never not held my attention for as long as it needs to be there. And they are absolutely brilliant articles.
And that's saying something who's got the attention span of a gnat.
True.
This all started because of my group at church, and I wrote my book, and my editor said, before you can publish this, you've got to be somebody. And I said, I am. I looked in the mirror. Look, it's me. He said, no, you've got to be somebody. Go out on social media. And it was being on social media. For me, that was LinkedIn. That's the only social media I know. And I started trying to do the societal piece and got sucked in to the law because that's my home territory. That's where I knew, that's where I could speak with authority.
So a big thank you to Quentin for coming on the show and talking to us about AI and the future of the legal profession. We've been your hosts, Scott Simmons and Elizabeth de Stadler, and this has been Legal Off the Leash.